everybody. Welcome to our Bose professional training webinar. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Mark Arajan, 21st Century, and we're thrilled to have John Schmidt here, who is sales engineer at Bose Pro, to review their complete offering. And whether you out there are new to 70-volt commercial and pro audio, or have been doing it for years, we believe this training should hopefully be very beneficial to you all. As always, this is going to be recording. It's going to be on our virtual conference center on our website. So if you want to check this out later, you have an employee who wants to jump on and see it after hours, this will be available for you. So, and if you have any questions, go ahead and ask them, and we'll get them answered for you after the training. So, John, really appreciate you being here, and take it away.
Yeah. Okay. As Mark said, I am John Schmidt. I'm the regional sales engineer. I actually cover the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast. And today I'm filling in for Chuck because he lost his voice this morning and couldn't do this presentation.
Kind of need that to do the presentation.
Yeah, a little bit. I'm going to go over our commercial line of speakers. We also have larger pro level speakers for concert halls and stuff like that I'm not going over today. But just wanted to make sure you knew that those were out there. I'm going to start out talking about the Free Space family. This is, if you're familiar with the older DS series speakers that Bose used to have, this is kind of the direct lineage from that. It's this similar technology, but with an updated look on a lot of it. It's our cost-effective line and a lot of specialty speakers that work in background music, foreground applications. And this line has more EN54 life safety rated speakers than the other lines we're going to be looking at. The FS series, there's the FS2 SE, the FS2, FS4. They both come in ceiling, surface, and pendant. But the surface of the 2 and 4 and the ceiling speaker for the 4 are all weather rated. So if you're ever in an application where you need a weather rated ceiling speaker, the FS4 CE. Throughout this presentation, our model numbering scheme is 2 letters to denote the product line, 1 letter to denote the woofer size, and then the letters after it are going to be surface, ceiling, pendant, and then the E means it's environmentally rated. So if I forget to mention that at some point, anytime you see the E, that's an environmentally rated speaker. And within the Free Space line, we have 2 lines of specialty speakers. There's the FS3 that is kind of a full system. It's a low frequency module and then satellites. So you can get a lot of coverage from a single home run, because the low frequency module is the transformer and crossover to go to the satellites. So you can do a single home run, single amplifier channel, and get a fairly large coverage. I think it's Raising Cane's that usually uses one of these for the entire restaurant. And then we also have the FS360P. This is obviously weather rated, but it's kind of the OG direct burial speaker that Bose came out with a while ago. And honestly, we haven't seen a need to update it because it still works incredibly well. You bury it halfway, so just the top sticks out of the sand, and it gives you sound in, gardens and outdoor landscape areas, primarily background music, just because the directionality is coming from a weird place for speech. And it is only in green. We get that question a lot of whether it comes in other colors. It's just green. And then to support these in smaller design applications, we have a series of Free Space amplifiers. These obviously can work with any speakers, but they're kind of paired with the Free Space line. They come in high impedance and low impedance for 70-volt applications. The high impedance ones will be stereo. The high impedance one, the low impedance ones are stereo, and the smaller high impedance one is a mono 90-watt amplifier. But these have some onboard selectable presets for our speakers and have a variety of inputs, so you can plug in with RCAs and things like that for background music applications. And you have the front knob volume control, so it's a really good kind of one-stop solution for when you need a background music system and don't want to put in a full processor and a full control system or anything like that. You just want an amp that the staff can go to and turn the music up and down. Next, we're gonna go into the Design Max family. This is our, more premium line of loudspeakers, sort of the flagship line. It's a little bit broader in its category, and just aesthetically and sonically a little bit better than the FS series. The core of this line is these 9 speakers. This line is very easy to design with. One of the things, for those of you who are familiar with 70-volt systems or just getting into it, a lot of manufacturers will do different size speakers for surface mount than for ceiling mount. So on the wall, you'll have a 5-inch speaker, and then in the ceiling, you'll have a 6-inch. And it's, for some reason, it's always the odd numbers on the wall and the even numbers in the ceilings. So the 3 inches of surface mount, 4 inches of ceiling mount, 5 inches surface, 6 inches ceiling. I don't know why they do that. We have the 3, 5, and 6 in surface mount, ceiling mount, and pendant for all 3. When you're looking at these, they are the same driver complement. Across the 3-inch speakers, all of them have the same drivers, same crossover, same electronics, same cabinet volume. So they sound very similar, which means when you're designing a system and you design it with ceiling speakers and then find out it's an open ceiling and you have to switch to pendants, you're not going to see a huge noticeable change. Or if they decide they want to go to surface mount speakers mounted to beams, you can make that change without having to redesign your system. Similarly, as you go from the 3 to the 5 to the 6, they're sonically very similar. You gain some SPL and you gain some low frequency extension as you get to the larger speakers, but the sonic signature, specifically in the speech intelligibility range, is the same across all of them. And I'll talk about the technology that they're using, but it's the same technology in all of them that's making that mid-range sound the way it does. So if you have a space where, we'll say a restaurant where you need 6-inch speakers or 5-inch speakers through the restaurant, but you just need a 3-inch speaker in the bathroom, you're not going to have a large sonic difference as you go between those 2 spaces. And similarly, the surface mounts are weather rated. So if you need to extend that experience to an outside space, you can maintain that same sonic signature outdoors as indoors just by switching to the surface mount enclosures. Outside of this core line, we have some outliers. We have subwoofers that pair with them, surface mount, ceiling mount, and pendant mount subwoofers. And then the DM2C Ultra Compact. This uses a different technology for the driver, so it sounds a little bit different, but it is a 3.9-inch depth. So on the often very dangerous assumption that everybody else followed code, these will fit anywhere. Since code is 4 inches above the ceiling, and anything above the ceiling has to be 4 inches above the grid. So as long as they did that, this will fit in any space. And then on the other end, we have the DM8 in surface mount and ceiling mount. This is aesthetically a similar speaker, but internally it's using a compression driver instead of a dome tweeter. So it moves a whole lot more air. So when you have a space where you might have background music, but then there's like a coffee shop performance area at the front, or one area where you need really high SPL, you can maintain the same aesthetic, but still push that higher SPL into an area that you need to. Very, very easy to work with, and for the most part, I haven't found any architects that argue with putting these speakers in, or any designers that argue with putting these in. If they're willing to put in ceiling speakers or surface mount speakers, they're willing to put in ours just because of the way they look. So you can see this is the form factor of the surface mounts. The yoke bracket that supports them is hidden by the cabinet enclosure, so you don't actually see any visible mounting hardware when they're mounted. The ceiling mount has very minimal bezel. It's actually a magnetic grill. So there's no visible actual bezel. It's just that little strip that doesn't have holes on the grill around the edge. And all of the logos are removable if you're working in an application where they don't want to see logos for whatever reason. And when the logos are removed, there's not a visible mark where the logo used to be. It's not like there's a square where the logo was or one hole that's bigger than the rest. The grill maintains that same hole spacing and hole pattern across where the logo was. They are also all paintable. Obviously, if you're trying to go a light color, we recommend starting with the white speakers, but all of these speakers are paintable. And this is the environmentally rated models that we have in this line. That the core 3, 5, and 6 surface mounts, and then we do have a weather rated pendant, but it is only the 6-inch. That was done to keep the cost on the 3 and the 5 down. And it was kind of assumed that if you needed an outdoor pendant, you would be needing the extra SPL and extension offered by the 6 anyway. But that's something to just be aware of if you ever encounter a situation where you need a weather-rated pendant speaker. The DM6PE is an environmentally rated speaker. So I was talking about the technology that we use in these speakers. So this is that core line of 9 speakers. All use what we call a dispersion alignment system, and that's what gives them the unique voicing. And I say unique; it's very clean, very smooth voicing, but it's consistent across the line. The kind of magic sauce in this: anytime you have a low frequency driver, a woofer, it will start to beam on the higher frequencies that it can support. Its pattern gets tighter. And so what we're doing is that bezel with the holes in it is actually mounted in front of that woofer. It's acting as the support for the tweeter, but it's also spreading the pattern of the wavefront coming off of the woofer to match the dispersion of the tweeter. Because what happens is you get that beam on the low frequency, and then you go to the wide pattern of the tweeter. So in a traditional ceiling speaker, you have this huge jump in coverage from very narrow off of the low frequency, and then you hit the crossover and your high frequency driver goes really wide, and you get this uneven dispersion pattern. By using this dispersion alignment system to spread the low frequency, it allows us to get a much smoother coverage pattern out of the loudspeaker, particularly in the crossover range, which is right in the middle of the speech range for most loudspeakers. But it means that when you are laying them out, you can trust the dispersion pattern to actually cover the area you need. You're not going to get these spots where the tone of the system changes as you move from one loudspeaker to another. All of the models that I talked about, everything in the DM line is 70 volt, 100 volt, or 8 ohm with a bypass. And we have the UL 1480A rating on all models. All of the ceiling mount models have a plenum rated back can. They ship with an adjustable tile bridge, and we do have a rough-in kit available. And the DM2LC is actually, when it's in bypass, it's in 16 ohm, which allows you to put 4 of them on an amp channel or 8 of them on an amp channel if you have an amp that can go down to 2 ohms. But you can get into systems that you can run low impedance and run a lot of speakers on a single line if you need to. So this is just a quick overview of how they install. For all of these speakers, we implemented what we call a quick hold mounting system, and it has 2 flavors. There's a ceiling mount version and a surface mount version. For the surface mount version, you pull your cable through the wall and then mount the yoke bracket onto the wall and terminate your cable at that point. It lets you get in and do pre-install. And then once you're ready, you can plug the speaker in, and the speaker actually just slides over that yoke bracket. And then you have locking detents to adjust the vertical angle. So when you have a large number of speakers that all need to be at the same angle, you can get that consistent angle without having to futz with it for hours. For the ceiling mount, you actually pull the cable through the speaker, and then we have spring-loaded dog ears. So when it goes up into the ceiling, you just push it up, and the dog ears spring themselves out, and then your hands are free to get a screwdriver and tighten everything down. The termination then happens underneath the speaker, so you're not above the ceiling. And then the magnetic grill goes over and covers everything. On both of the speakers, the transformer tap is on the front, surface mount and ceiling mount. And so this means, particularly for the ceiling mount, when you have to go back and service it, or if you're going into commission with a consultant that called something out, or if you just need to verify the install and verify the taps, it's just a matter of pulling the magnetic grill off of the speakers, and you can see whether the termination is correct and whether the tap setting is correct without having to get on a ladder and get above the ceiling and pull ceiling tiles. Particularly useful if you're installing in a hard cap ceiling where you don't have access to above the ceiling, or it's problematic to try to get above the ceiling. So in a hard cap ceiling, these speakers are great because you don't actually have anything you need to get above the ceiling for through the installation and service of them. Within this line, we do have accessories. The U bracket is included for the surface mount. We also have a pan tilt bracket that gives you extra directions of articulation, and a ceiling mount bracket that will push it beyond the 45 degrees that you get on the standard yoke bracket, so you can mount to a ceiling and fire straight into the room. And as I said before, for the ceiling mount, the tile bridge is included, and we have a rough-in kit if you have a situation where you need to give the drywall guys something to put in the ceiling to save your spot. The pendant speakers also have their own special mounting system. That we ship them with a gripple cable. For those of you who aren't familiar, it's just a quick latching wire securing system. But that gripple cable mounts to your structure, and then from there, the other end has a clip that clips onto the speaker. And again, your termination happens. For the pendants, it all happens on the top because that stuff stays accessible anyway. But if you look, it's all inside of that recessed cup. So when you're on the floor, you don't actually see any of the mounting hardware or cable connections on the back. So on the back, we have obviously the connector and the transformer tab, but we also have the primary suspension tab and a secondary suspension tab if you are in a location that requires that for seismic rating or other code reasons where you need 2 suspension points. The suspension cable, the primary suspension cable, ships with these speakers. An additional cable is an additional option. We also have a conduit adapter if you have a situation where you need to bring conduit down and have your cable inside of conduit. And we also have a threaded adapter option, which is mainly just there if you have a situation where you need to minimize the sway of the pendants because you're installing outdoors or installing someplace where airflow is a concern and you're having pendants sway. So that was the quick rundown of the FS and DM line. I'm going to pause real quick if anybody has any questions about those, because I know I went really fast.
So questions that I have is kind of for those out there that maybe haven't quoted out 70-volt systems or a little unfamiliar with the lineup. We went over the free space amps and the Design Max speakers. Is there a certain amplifier to pair up based on application? Like, you prefer one free space amp over another based on application? I mean, can you kind of like break that down? I guess I'm just talking about amplification, because I got the speaker part down. So you can kind of build off that for us.
Yeah, so when you're looking at amplifiers, particularly when you're talking about a 70-volt system, I'm going to move to the next slide just because it's more pleasant to look at. When you're talking about distributed audio background music systems and amplifier choices, the primary thing that you're concerned with is the wattage of the amplifier. And in 70-volt systems, that's going to change depending on how many speakers you have. When you're looking at 8 ohm systems, you've got one speaker it is what it is. And you want to basically go whatever the rated power for your speaker is, you go at least 1.5 times that when you're talking about 8 ohm. So if you have a 300 watt speaker, you want to do a 500 watt amplifier or a 450 watt minimum. As far as 70 volt, it's based on that transformer tap. So the transformer taps, they depending on what you have it set to, it's pulling 5, 10, 20, 40 watts per speaker. And you just add all those up in your line, and then you want to make sure you have about 20% headroom. So if you have, we'll say, just to make my math easy, if you have 10 of the DM6s, which have an 80 watt tap on them, or actually, I think, let's say you're tapping them to 40 watts, you need 400 watts plus 20%. So you need a 500 watt amplifier to drive that. The benefit to 70 volt over 8 ohm is when you're working with low impedance, there's a minimum impedance that an amplifier can run at. And so every time you add a speaker, you're halving your impedance, or every time you double the number of speakers you have, you're halving the impedance. So an 8 ohm speaker, the amp sees 8 ohm. If you put 2 speakers on that line, the amp now sees 4 ohms. If you put 4 speakers on that line, the amp's now seeing 2 ohms. And 2 ohms is the minimum rating you'll get on like really high-end amplifiers. Most of our amplifiers will go down to 2 ohm, but it's not uncommon to find amps that can only handle 4 ohm. And so you're limited to at most 4 speakers on a line when you're talking about running low impedance. When you go to 70 volt, there's a transformer in line that ramps up the voltage, which then ramps down the amperage and adjusts the impedance accordingly. And you can run 40 or 50 speakers on a line in some applications, and still be within the tolerances. It really comes down at that point, it's just the wattage that you're looking at. And so if you've got a 1,000 watt amplifier and you're tapping your speakers at 10 watts, you can put 80 speakers on that line and be fine.
Yeah, so it boils down to the space you're trying to cover.
Yeah.
How much coverage of audio you want in each room, depending on how the size of it. So
yeah.
No, that's good to know. So I mean, I think for everybody out there, free space, and how many amps are in the free space lineup again? I know those in one.
There are. Let me see if I can jump back there quickly. So in the free space amp line, so we have 4 amplifiers in the free space amp line. There's the high impedance, so 70 or 100 volt, that is 1 by 90 watt. So it's just a single channel, 90 watts, small space. The high impedance version, these are the 2 half rack unit. It's 2 by 50. So that's, your classroom where you have 2 speakers on the wall. And then the full rack space units, it's 2 by 100 at 70 volt, 2 by 120 at 70 volt. So again, you can go up to 120 watts on that, however you're tapping your ceiling speakers. And then we have 2 by 120 at low impedance. So again, 2 speakers on the wall, bigger speakers. I'm going to get to some other amplifiers later. These are our small amplifiers. These are for like I was saying, it's the small installations where you've got, you've got 4 to 6 speakers or 2 speakers on the wall. When you get into larger, more complicated systems, we've got some larger amplifiers that I'll go over in a little bit.
Very good. Thank you. Before I may get ahead of us too, based on application, do you guys offer any, if it's like a really large application, some of our dealers might need some assistance, do you offer any sort of design services as well to kind of help them through?
Yeah. For dealers, we can do some design support, especially for larger systems. We have a pro tech support line that's available all day, and then the local RSE for a project can help out with whatever's going on.
Thank you so much. All right.
Yeah. So yeah, this is, the benefit to the DM line is it's going to kind of blend into whatever decor people want. So you're not having to get in arguments with architects over how the speakers look. In higher education and corporate, there's a large push to try to standardize, and DM helps out a lot with that because you can do, you can standardize a room, but still apply the same system to rooms that have an open ceiling versus a drop tile ceiling by switching between the ceiling mount and pendant mounts without having to have two different standards. You're just changing one letter in the part number. Everything else about the system stays the same. So now I'm going to talk about some of the bigger electronics that support these systems. So these are the power space amplifiers. These are just a brick of power. There's no smarts on the amplifier. There's no processing. It's just when you need, you've got another processor that's handling all of your zone processing, mixing, source selection, all of that. And then you just need to take a line level output and bump it up to speaker level. So they're very cost effective. They can run in 8 ohm or 70 volt, and you can mix and match each channel. You can run 2 8 ohm channels and 2 70 volt channels. And it's 4x300, 2x600, and 2x1000 watt. So when if you have a large PA and you need 2000 watt channels, single rack space, 2000 watt. So very basic brick of power. The next is the Power Space Plus amplifiers. These do have smarts on board. They have a digital zone processor. So you can do source select and volume control for multiple spaces. There's the 150 and the 300. So it's 4x150. So it's 450 watt channels, and 4x300. So 4 300 watt channels. Each of these can support multiple zones, and each zone can be assigned multiple outputs. So if you have, again, we'll take the restaurant example. If you have a dining area that has loudspeakers and a subwoofer, and then a separate area that's like a private dining room that has, again, ceiling speakers and subwoofers, you can divide that up as 2 zones that operate independently. Your volume controls and source selects are independent. But zone 1 is 2 channels of the amplifier, 1 channel for your full range speakers and 1 channel for your subwoofer. So you can divide that up and divide and conquer. And we have our analog zone controllers work with these. You can do 1 controller per zone. We have a very fun and exciting naming convention on our controllers. It's the CC1, the CC2, and the CC3. CC1 is for a single source, and CC2 is for 2 sources. You've got A, B. And then here's the fun part. The CC3 is for 4 sources. I don't know why we didn't just call it the CC4, but that will do A, B, C, D. So you can select between 4 different sources on that one. And here's just kind of an example of how a system like that would be set up. You'd have your 2 music players and a PC source plugged into the amplifier itself, and then speaker cable going out to your 4 separate zones, a controller in each zone, all tied back to, we have a control split that allows you to plug 4 controllers into our single control port on the back of the processor. And it just gives you 4 zones with basic control of each zone. When you need to go beyond what this can do, if you need multiple controllers, if you need more wattage, we have the CSP processors. So it's commercial sound processor. These can handle more zones, and they do not have power on the back end. So you're going into, again, you'd go into one of the power space amplifiers or one of our larger amplifiers for each zone. But the 1248 is 12 inputs across 4 zones, across 8 outputs. So again, you can have 4 zones that each have 2 amp channels assigned to it, or 2 analog outputs on the processor. And you can have 12 input sources. So if you have a whole bunch of music players, or if, we'll see in spas sometimes where they'll have multiple music players that are each set to a different channel, and they want people to have the ability in each of the rooms to select between all of the channels. This processor, as well as the PowerSpace Plus amplifiers, configure with a web GUI that is based on kind of the workflow of a network switch configuration. So the intention is that you don't need a DSP certification to be able to program one of these. You can kind of walk through. There's a wizard that walks you through, asks you how many sources you have, how many zones you have, what outputs are assigned to each zone, and then what speakers you have. You pull them from a drop down. They load their EQ presets, and it goes from there. And so these, as well as the PowerSpace Plus, have all the EQ presets for all of our loudspeakers, including our legacy loudspeakers, in place. So there's a very, very quick, very easy commissioning off of these processors. And this is kind of the workflow we would see with one of those. So you can see multiple music players, satellite receivers, whatever your audio sources are, going into that processor, and then the processor going out to multiple amplifiers that then go out to the zones. The other thing that you gain with this processor is this supports our digital controllers, follows the same naming convention, the CC1D, CC2D, and CC3D. But with the digital controllers, you can assign multiple controllers to a single zone. So if you need a volume control at a hostess station and a volume control in the manager's office, you can use the digital controllers and they will both work. This also supports our Control Space Remote app, which allows you to create a custom GUI that runs on an iPad or Android device. So some more features, but a very similar concept in how it sets up. We also have, you see that ambient mic that's shown in the very center at the top. That is for automatic volume adjustment. Basically, when you, again, I keep going back to the restaurant concept, but when you have a space where sometimes it's really empty and sometimes it's really full, you don't want the music to be too loud when it's empty, but you don't want it to disappear into the noise floor when the space gets full. That ambient mic will actually monitor the ambient noise level in the room and adjust the volume of the system accordingly, based on a curve that you set up. So lots of fun features in this. Creates it's a simple way to create a really good background music system. Any questions on those amps or processors before I move on to the next product line?
No, you're good. Move on, please.
Okay, cool. So I'm going to talk real quick about EdgeMax. This is one of our more esoteric products, but also really, really fun and really good and useful. It was the development was for background foreground systems, and it found applications for itself that we never dreamed of. So when you're talking about a traditional ceiling speaker, you're looking at conical coverage, which means you're fighting for the same space as the sprinkler people, the lighting people, the Wi-Fi people, the air conditioning people, because you're all working off of that conical coverage pattern. What EdgeMax does is it actually projects from the edge of the room, so it lets you take the space that nobody else wants in the room, but still maintain a ceiling form factor. And it does it with a 0 degree down and 75 degree up coverage. It's using a 8-inch woofer and a 1.2-inch compression driver, I believe, that gives it a really nice smooth low end, but still a lot of push on the high frequency. And it's a fairly large ported enclosure, so it has really good low end. The magic sauce in this is the phase guide. So we basically take the wavefront off of that compression driver and fire it into a plate that directs it down. And then we have a slot diffuser that takes that waveform that's now going down and shifts it forward so it projects into the room. And then that membrane that you see, the white film, is actually gain shading it so that the people directly below the speaker aren't being blown out, but you're still projecting far enough to cover the people in the back of the room. So it's a really cool design that was designed by people that know more about physics than I ever will. It comes in two flavors. The 180 is obviously 180-degree horizontal. It's intended to kind of mount in the middle of the wall. And the 90 is intended to mount in corners. When these are mounted within a foot or so of the wall, they sound like a surface mount speaker that is mounted about a foot down from the ceiling. So you get the performance of a surface mount speaker without actually taking up any space on the wall. And it allows you to kind of make use of that perimeter ceiling space that a lot of people don't want. And sometimes it's the only space you have available in a ceiling. This is a great application where we used them to project sound into the restaurant area from the perimeter, but it also meant that the sound was coming from the bar area where the TVs were, and it wasn't firing into the bar area, so the bartenders could still talk and they could still work without having sound blasting at them. But then as soon as you got to the other side of the bar, the audio picked up and carried on into the room. These have also found a kind of niche for themselves as under balcony speakers when people don't want to see a speaker in front of them, but they still need sound coming from in front of them. And then spaces like this where you don't really have a ceiling to mount to, they don't want you dropping pendants from the speaker or from the ceiling. This slide is actually kind of difficult because you can't see the speakers in it, but they're actually in the ceiling against the wall under the balcony and above the balcony and firing into this space. So the one above the balcony is actually covering down into this floor area. But it gave us a way to put background music into this, concourse area without having visible speakers all over the place. And then the other place,
one of the advantages to these are you're not having to install, twice as many speakers, right? You could use, I don't know, half of these.
Yeah, you end up doing about half as many or a quarter as many for a lot of these.
Right.
And the other place where these, the main application these were built for originally was conference rooms. And one of the unique things about this is because it sounds like a surface mount speaker, it gives the localization of surface mount speaker. So historically, we always used to design conference rooms where your speech audio came from the ceiling and your program audio came from the TV. And that was because we were doing audio only conferencing, but nobody does audio only conferencing anymore. We do video conferencing almost exclusively. And so you want that localization to the display, but this allows you to mount a speaker above the display and it will localize the sound sounds like it's coming from the display, but you don't have visible surface mount speakers on the wall. It also lets you work around all of the fun architectural ceilings that people like putting in, all of the weird ceiling pendant speakers and pendant light. There's not pendant speakers, but pendant lights and sculpture style ceilings that are being put in a lot of boardrooms. And then that 70-degree down angle also means that you're not firing into ceiling mics. So that helps with your gain staging for your AEC. And as a general rule, whatever your ceiling height is, double that is your distance where we can cover a seated listener. So you can see here, this is a 10-foot ceiling and it's a 20-foot deep room. So we're well within that coverage to the 14-foot to the farthest listener. As you get farther out, you can put the 180s on the wall as kind of a delay speaker to extend sound into the back of the room. Before designing with this, we do have a BMS design tool is a online tool for designing business music systems, background music systems. And you basically give it the square footage of your space, your ceiling height, tell it how loud you want it to be, and it'll make recommendations on which speakers to use. Very, very easy tool to use. Any questions on Edge Max before I jump on to the last product line I was going to talk about?
No, I think we're good.
Okay. So last product line I want to go over, at least I think it's the last one, is the control space processors. So these are the big boy DSPs. So these are open architecture DSPs that can be set up to do whatever you need them to do. We have four processors in the EX line, as well as 3 expansion boxes. The core of the line is the EX440C and the 1280C and the 12AEC, which you have to really articulate that AEC so it doesn't get confused with the ATC. But the 440C is a conference processor, 4 analog in, 4 analog out. It also has 12 channels of Dante and 8 channels of AEC on board. It also has a POTS line, a VoIP line, and stereo USB in and out. So it can support multiple conferencing protocols at once. You can bridge calls internally if you write the processor to do that. And it can support web conferencing through the USB port. If you connect it to a computer, you can get your audio in and out of Zoom calls and things like that. The big brother to that is the 1280. The 1280C, same basic concept, but you've got 12 analog in, 8 analog out. You have 64 by 64 Dante, 12 channels of AEC on board, 2 VoIP lines, POTS, stereo USB, all of the same stuff that you had on the 440C, but with extra I/O included. And then the 12AEC is a DSP chip, a Dante card, and 12 channels of AEC. So when you need to add extra AEC to a system, but you don't want to pay for extra preamps, extra VoIP lines, all of the stuff that's on the 1280, you can throw in the 12 AEC and just bus audio over to it over Dante, run the audio through your AEC, and then bus it back to the 1280, and you can get extra channels of AEC that way. You can also drop these in spaces where all you need is Dante in and Dante out. In the rare occasion where you have a space that is 100% Dante and you don't need control over anything and you don't need any of that fun stuff, you can drop this. You can drop this in as a standalone DSP because it is a full DSP chipset that's on board. Any questions on these before I jump to the peripherals?
Nope,
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. So we have 3 expansion boxes that go with this. There's the 8 ml and the 4 ml they are mic line. It's 4 and 8 channel. For the mic line, you have obviously a 3 conductor balanced mic or line level input, but you also have a general purpose input and a general purpose output. Two general purpose outputs. And that is so you can have a mute button and then a red-green LED trigger internal. And we put all of those on a single Phoenix. So if you have microphones that do that, you're not pulling wires to audio and logic on different boxes or different ends of the same box. Is a single Phoenix for each microphone. So it makes it a lot easier to install, a lot easier to service because you can unplug each mic individually. You're not having to figure out which logic is tied to which microphone. It's all right there. And we do have a pre-made dongle that goes from the 7-pin Phoenix to the clock audio RJ45 connection. And then we also have the EXUH. This is sort of the BYOD solution. It's stereo USB and then a line for a headset TRRS and a headset RJ9. So the thinking behind the RJ9 is when you have a desktop phone, you can plug in where you would normally plug a headset in for like an operator and plug that into this device, and it allows you to then dial a call on the desk phone and have it go through the PA. Basically, the speaker phone on the desk phone becomes your conferencing system. So that's really useful in applications where you have that CEO that doesn't ever want to have to deal with a touch panel. He just wants to dial a call on his desk phone like he always does. You can have that simple interface of just dialing a call on the phone and it goes through the system. All of these boxes have this rounded form factor. So when you mount them under the table, you're not banging your knees against it. You're not hurting yourself. It mounts with those dog ears on the side. We also have a magnetic plate. So you can mount the plate and then this clips on with magnets and then a set screw. And that's useful when you have the really high value conference room tables that you don't want to drill into. You can ship that plate to the table manufacturer and they can mount it in there for you. All of these boxes are Dante devices and they are PoE and they can be daisy chained. So what that means is with like the 8 ml, you can put 2 8 mls and a UH under the table, daisy chain them together. You have one cable going back to your DSP. You're getting 16 channels of microphone and BYOD conferencing over USB on that one Dante line. So it drastically limits the amount of cable you're having to pull and the just time involved in the install. And this all ties together in Control Space Designer. This is our DSP software. It's very similar to any other open architecture DSP software you've probably worked with. It supports our EX and ESP processors. And within there, we have some specialized routing blocks and software algorithms. We have a conference room router that actually allows you to do all of the routing that would normally be associated with combining multiple conference rooms. So it does, or not combining, but with setting up a conference room, it talks you through a wizard. You tell it how many mics you have, you tell it how many far end sources you have and how many local program sources, how many overhead zones you have, and then you hit go. And it creates a block that has all of the matrixing that would normally be associated with, that massive matrix mixer that you end up with in the middle of every conference room. And then it gives you basic controls that you would normally get, the controls that you would normally drop in as external controls from your matrix mixer for your AMX or Crestron programmer to grab onto. They are built into that module and they're right there for you, pre-labeled and ready to go. We also have a router block for room combining. So all of the matrixing that normally happens with room combining, which is kind of represented here, can be captured and dropped in with just an expansion onto that conference room router block. When you drag the conference room router block, it becomes a room combined block as well. So when you have a divisible conference room that, sometimes it's 3 rooms, sometimes it's 1 room, you can drop that in. Very quick, easy workflow for building those spaces. So that's kind of the algorithms that we have built in. There's other fun stuff we have in there. And then these are the controllers I talked about before. The EX processors also support all of these controllers. We, as a general rule, prefer the D series, the CC1, 2, and 3D when we're working with the digital processors, just because there's some more flexibility. We also have 2 larger wall plate controllers, the CC16 and the CC64. The CC64 is 4 control knobs and a menu knob, as well as 4 menu buttons, and you can go, I think, 6 pages deep on those 4 knobs. So you can get a whole lot of control out of that wall plate. And then the Control Space remote software that I spoke about earlier, You can also write custom GUI, custom control for all of the EX processors. Drag whatever controls, whatever parameters you want to control into the file, and load it onto an iOS or Android device. This is it's a free download on Android and iOS, and there's no licensing fees or anything like that to use it. It's just included on all of the processors. So this is a really good way to get quick, easy control of a system. Any questions on that? I know I went real fast, but I know we're running short on time. So
No, I guess just to summarize everything, John, we mentioned from the very beginning the free space. I think it's, more for, single room applications. The power space is more for multi-channel, larger systems. And then the control space, would you say it's more for like conference rooms type applications?
Control space is for applications where so the control space processors would replace the CSP processors, the commercial sound processor line that I was talking about.
Right.
That is designed for, you've got 4 sources and a paging microphone, and you can select which source you're listening to, and when the page microphone comes on, it overrides those sources and goes to the space. And that's about as complicated as you can make that system. With Control Space Designer, with the CSD devices, with the EX processors, it's open architecture, so you can make it do whatever you want it to do. If you have 6 microphones that need to be mixed together and then go out to multiple outputs, that can all happen internally on the processor. We have regular mixers, we have gain sharing and gating auto mixers, dynamics processors if you need to take a microphone and put compression on it, put auto gain compensation. So we see a lot of application in conference rooms. We also see a lot of situations where you can run an entire church. If it's a small traditional church where they've got 6 microphones, you can run it all off of an EX processor and give them a control space remote app to give volume up down on each of the microphones, and they're not having to deal with an external mixer and EQ knobs that they don't know what they do, things like that.
Right.
So there's a lot more flexibility in that. Or even if it's a background music system where you need more than the 4 zones you can get out of a CSP processor. If you're having to do a 10 or 15 zone distribution system, where you have 12 analog inputs to work with, so you can bring in 6 analog sources. You have Dante on board, so you can have multiple processors and send audio from one processor to another to expand your input and output capability. And so you could have a building where each floor of the building has the ability to select from 12 or 15 different audio sources. And as long as you're pushing everything over Dante, you can run that off of a single EX processor and have a single control space remote app that would allow you to select which floor you're looking at and select the source, change volumes for different zones on that floor. However complicated you want to make it, you can make it that complicated.
No, fantastic, John. Again, really appreciate you being here with us. For everybody out there, we stock the full lineup of Bose Professional. We're here to help you guys, help design applications for you. I know there's a lot we put in here, and John, you've been mentioned too. There's some other products that you haven't gotten into, so it's Bose Pro could help you out for all of your commercial needs, and we're here to help all of our dealers with whatever they need as far as Bose Pro goes. So, John, I really appreciate your time helping us out today.
Yeah, no problem.